I'd like to call this meeting to order. We welcome you all here today. This is the Weber County Commission meeting, dated the 19th day of November, this Tuesday, 10 a.m., actually 10:01, according to the clock. It's good to have you all here. The meeting today will start with an invocation by Zachary Dam. We appreciate him when he comes and opens us, and we appreciate that. And then the Pledge of Allegiance will be by Ryan Calley, and the thought of the day will be by Commissioner Harvey. So Zachary, please.
Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this day that you've given us. We thank you for the beauty that you've created. We thank you for the ability you've given to all of us to enjoy it. We thank you for the life and the health that you've given us to be present here today. We pray that you would help us to appreciate the blessings of liberty that you've given us in this country. We thank you for this time of year when we can take time to pause and remember all that you've done for us over the past year. We thank you, Lord, for our county commissioners and their willingness to serve us in this capacity. We pray that you would bless them with wisdom and discretion as they handle the affairs of the county, that you would guide them to make good decisions, and that you would help us all to strive together in a way that would please you. It is in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ryan and Zach. Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you, Commissioner Jenkins. You know, for those here, recently the elected officials and our human resource participated in a conference where all counties in the state of Utah get together. It's called the Utah Association of Counties. And those bodies, it's a group that was established, nearly 100 years ago. And it's an opportunity for us as respective groups, whether it be a group of commissioners, a group of clerk auditors, a group of surveyors or treasurers or attorneys or sheriffs or whatever it be, for them to get together and to talk amongst themselves and all of us as a collective group on things that are happening throughout the state, how we can better and more efficiently move county government for the people we represent, but also within this state body politic. This is a great group of leaders. For me, it's a wonderful time to learn and to reacquaint, to have great discussions about a number of different topics with other leaders from around the state. I want to congratulate and recognize Mr. Ricky Hatch, who, by the collective body of over about 600, was elected as the UAC, that was the chime of approval, Ricky, as the UAC president to lead the whole body in the state of Utah. So if you'd join me in giving Ricky a round of applause. But with Ricky's leadership too, I also want to tell you that having attended now for several years, it's great being a part of a Weber County team that, in my opinion, it feels as though we lead the other counties in a lot of things. As we sit in rooms, oftentimes discussion, or if a question comes, they point to one of my colleagues, Commissioner Frohr or Commissioner Jenkins, and they're almost treated as rock stars down there, of course, without the hair. But they have just so much empirical knowledge because of their service through the decades, and it's just great to learn about different thing, and I think the whole board of counties, or all the counties in general, are moving forward because of the experience of these two. So it's being in the room where it happens, it's been a privilege. And so I just want to close and let all of you know how grateful I am to be able to serve where I am right now, and being able to learn from these two and from others. And it's just wonderful. We're doing really good. I can tell you, men are usually prone to compartmentalize. Most of the men understand that, and most of the women understand that about men. But in the compartments that we have behind us, you're welcome to take down any one of those and look inside and examine it carefully and closely. To clean we've looked at every corner. There's nothing there that we're ashamed of. This has been an open and honest group, a board, and it's great to be a part of that. So those are my thoughts, Commission Chair. Thank you.
You bet. Wonderful thoughts. We appreciate that, and I agree with you. I enjoyed being down to UAC, and we experienced a lot of successes down there this last week, so it was very good. Well, very good. With that, we go to the next item on our agenda, public comments. We put these at the front of the meeting, so if there's anybody that would like to address items, we can address them as we go along. So now's the time. If any of you folks would care to stand up and come to the podium and address us, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, I don't see any quick movement, so we'll go back to the agenda. So we will now go to the consent items on our agenda. This is item F. F1, request for approval of warrants 2180 through 2204 and 444,861 through 445,077 in the amount of $1,218,619. Item 2 is request for approval of purchase orders in the amount of $93,849. Item 3 is for a request for approval of the minutes for our November 12th meeting. Item 4 is approval of business licenses. And item 5 is approval to sell surplus properties. Parcel 05-112-0026. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
No questions.
Motion? Yeah, Ricky, would you like to go through those payments?
You bet. We issued 15 purchase orders this week for $94,000. 40% of that amount, or $37,000, is for IT, and that will be used towards purchasing switches for the health department, for the sheriff, and the conference center. 32%, or $30,000, is for the conference center, and that's to purchase food and beverage. And then 11%, or $10,000, is for our recreation department, and that will go to purchase and install a flagpole for the shooting complex. And by the way, Colonial Flag is heavily discounting that and is donating money, and they will be fundraising to pay for that entire amount.
That flagpole is the one we've talked about, Commissioners. The largest, that'll be the tallest flagpole between here and the northern border of Utah.
As far as checks, we will have issued 242 checks for $1.2 million. 42% of that amount, or $508,000, is for the transfer station to pay for disposal fees. 16%, or $200,000, is our monthly payment to the paramedic fund. 9%, or $105,000, is going to public defender fees. And 7%, or $89,000, is for the jail, and that will pay for medical and mental health, as well as utilities and food. And that's it.
That does it. Any other questions? Now I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent items, or items F, like Foxtrot, on the agenda as presented.
Motion? I'd second. And second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved. Very good. Thank you. Okay. First item under action items is item G1, presentation for approval of the Weber County Board of Canvas for the 2019 election. Ryan Calley.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's good to be here.
Good morning.
So this year typically would have been just a municipal and special district year, but of course we had the question as to whether we should study the form of government, which also made it a special election for the county. So really quickly, I'd just like to go through a few statistics and a little bit of the election process, and then we'll get to the final results. Just as by way of reference, now we're starting to be able to have some numbers and some figures to really see the impact of vote by mail and what that's had in voter participation. So in 2011, there were 19,164 votes cast, and that was the last year that we did not do vote by mail that was a similar cycle. So I compare 4 years back so that we get the same races, the same types of things. In 2015, we had 32,235 votes cast, and this year we had 42,304 votes cast for a 40% turnout. So there's
What was that number again? How many?
42,304.
Wow.
So that's more than double what we got 8 years ago
Yeah.
before we did vote by mail. And I think that's a great thing. Presenting the ballot, I don't know that it really makes it any easier for people to vote. But what it does is it gets the ballot in front of them, informs them that there is an election, and lets them think about it a little bit, and then go out and research the candidates, the issues, and be able to cast that vote. But I think that's a real neat trend. So we are trending in the right direction in participation, and I think that's neat to see the discussions that's going on in these elections that I think mean so much more even so than some of the national ones that get all of the attention.
So Ryan, of those who are registered to vote, what percentage is that?
40.3%.
Really? So 40%?
Still not where we want to be. We've got a long ways to go.
Compared to other counties in the state, how does that compare?
I'm not sure how that compares to other counties. It's really hard to compare across county lines and things like that. And like I said, I go back to 4-year cycles so that we get the same cities having mayoral races, those types of things. But as we've looked back over the years, we're usually about right where the rest of the state is, sometimes just a percentage point or two higher in turnout. But we're typically right about where the state is.
So Ryan, 40%, if they're 40% of the electorate that's informed, that have gone out of their way to study the issues and vote, I'm okay with that. What you don't want is you don't want people who are not informed. So you're doing a great job. I'm actually very, very happy with this. Our numbers are going up, and I do believe they're informed voters who are voting.
I would agree with the questions we get in our office. Most of the questions that we got this year were, how do I find out more information about the candidates?
Yeah.
And I think that's great. That's what we want, is to see people actively engaged, having the discussions. We do monitor social media, and, neighbors and things like that are talking about the elections. And so I would agree. So with that, we did mail out 105,034 ballots. We received back 41,278 of those that we did count, and that accounted for 97.6% of all of the ballots that were cast. So the remaining 2.4% were cast in person. So a vast majority of our voters are voting by mail, and we received 2/3 of all of our ballots back in drop boxes, which we have at all of our libraries and city halls. And we just got the last 24-hour drop box installed at the Ogden Valley Library. And so that's great. So every library, every city hall has that. And those have been really popular and convenient over the weekend. Sometimes I'll drive by the Roy Municipal Building where I live, and you just see a line of cars dropping ballots in. And so it's great for them to be able to do that at their own convenience and put that in a secure place. We did receive 528 ballots that we were not able to count. 154 of those were received after the postmark deadline, which is always unfortunate, but ballots have to be postmarked the day before the election to count. We did receive 188 back that weren't signed. And that's despite arrows and stop signs and everything we can possibly think of on those envelopes to get voters to sign it. But that's the ultimate check to ensure that everybody gets one vote and that it really is the person who the ballot was addressed to that's returning that. So that's something we're going to take a look at our design. That is up a little bit from what we've experienced in the past few years.
It'd be nice if we could get those down to the double digit, whether
It would
was
be.
20 or 30 instead of 120 or 30.
Yes. For people to take the time to cast the ballot but not sign it, that always frustrates me because we're just missing that signature on there. And then there were 183 that did not match the signatures that we have on file. We do mail a letter to every single one of those voters and give them an opportunity to fix it. A lot of voters take that opportunity to correct it, but we did have 183 that did not do that, so we were unable to count their ballots. And then lastly, we had 88 provisional ballots that were cast, and this is truly a testament to our poll workers, but we were able to count all 88 of those provisional votes, which is a tremendous feat. That means that they're checking the identity of the voters, the forms are filled out correctly and everything like that. So that's the first time in my career that I've ever seen 100% of the provisionals cast when there's more than just a handful. So with that, the final results for Proposition 3 were against it were 26,756, and voting for it were 14,527, which represented a 64.8 to 35.2% defeat of Proposition 3. And then the last comment I would like to make is just thanking the countless volunteers. You know, we look at elections, we get that ballot in the mail, we sign it, we send it in or drop it in a drop box, and then we just wait for the results. But behind every one of those ballots is an army of people that really aren't paid a whole lot. I call them volunteers. They do receive a little bit of money, but really, in my mind, they're volunteers that do a tremendous job, whether that's in our office or out in the polling places, sometimes handling difficult situations, but ensuring the integrity of the election, and they play a key role in that. And we have one of the leanest elections offices in the state. If you look at the number of employees that we have dedicated to elections with our population, it really is a lean team and a great team. And so Daniel, Megan, and Trinity really do a phenomenal job supporting these elections and making sure that we get it right so that the will of the people is reflected in the results. So with that, I ask you to approve the results for this special election that was just held.
Good. Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, if I take just a minute or two.
Please, Commissioner Farrar.
First off, just congratulations. You and your team do a great job of, as you stated, making sure the integrity of our election process is upheld, and making sure that anybody that does want to participate, which I hope everybody would, but obviously 40% is not everybody, but anybody that wants to participate has that ability to do so. We don't try to prejudge or eliminate anybody, which is really what makes this country what it is. I did have a question, though, on, I had one or two calls from the Ogden Valley area concerning mail-in ballots, and I don't know if this is a post office issue or our issue. I guess there was a notice posted on, I believe it was the Eden post office at sometime in the afternoon, that it was after 2 or 3 o'clock. Again, I may not be entirely accurate, that don't put your ballot in the mailbox there. It had to go to Ogden or somewhere else. Is there a reason for that, or was that a post office issue, or because I understand they have to be postmarked the day before, or is that an issue with our system?
It's the post office that posts those notices, and they do it because anything that would be deposited after that time at the post office would not receive a postmark of that day. So every postal box that you go to, or if you walk into the post office, it'll have a tag on it that says last collection is 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever that is. And so at that time, the post office has put those notices. And that's something we can certainly work with the post office to maybe point them to a drop box, because what they do right now is on those tags, they tell them to come to our office and bring that to us. Where they still would be able to put that in a drop box, say over at the library, for example, and still have that. But if they were to put that in the box without that notice, it would receive a postmark that would be too late for it to be counted.
Well, maybe you could just, and that's what I brought up to the individual, or a couple of individuals. Well, did you go to the lock? Because we did have a lock box in the Ogden Valley Library at that time, did we not?
Yes.
That maybe the post office just say if it's a ballot, take it to the library.
Yep, and both the city hall and the library have outdoor boxes there.
Okay.
So,
But all in all, great job, Ryan. We appreciate what
appreciate
you
you
do.
bringing that up.
You know, that becomes a little bit of an issue. I remember when Tom Hatch ran last time he got, or not Tom Hatch, was the old Speaker of the House? Mel Brown. And he had enough ballots cast for him to win the election, but they were placed in a mailbox up there. And the mailbox, the mail has to go from where he was at down to Salt Lake and then be returned to the county.
Right.
And by the time the postmark date and it all happened, he was a day late on about 160 or 70 ballots.
Cost him the election.
It cost him the election. And I know he was really upset about it, and they tried to do something about it, but it becomes a timing issue with the post office and with the county.
Yep, and we have had a lot of discussions at the legislature, and Mel Brown, I'd be happy to discuss that outside of this meeting. There's some other things there that I don't know if the general public is aware of on that, but that's the reason for the notices is this type of thing. The post office here in Ogden is great as well. They hand mark every single ballot that comes through their facility, and we go collect those daily from there, and then also on election night. Most of the elections, they will actually send a representative over with any ballots that they have in their possession at about 6 o'clock on election night. So there is a lot of things that we've discussed both with the legislature, amongst ourselves, and worked with the post office to try to ensure that all of those ballots that are cast in time are able to be counted.
That's really good news. I had no idea, Ryan, that was taking place to that level. I don't know. All I know is that this vote by mail, you guys are getting down better and better and better. And I know when we had our ballots, we filled them out the minute we got the mail from our box out front. And my wife says, well, I got to go to the store. I'm going to go mail them right now. So literally, I voted about 15 minutes after I got my ballot. That's great. All right. I'm open for a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the Weber County Board of Canvass results that were presented today by Mr. Ryan Cowley. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate your efforts in your department, what you do.
Thank you.
All right. Item 2 today is request for approval of agreement by and between Weber County and Wakeless Holdings, LLC, to ensure the proper installation of survey monuments for the Halcyon Lake Estate subdivision.
Hi, Commissioners.
Mr. Steve Burton, hi.
So this subdivision was approved by the Commission a few weeks back and has been recorded. This is one of the steps as they look at developing the subdivision. They're required to install survey monuments. This is the final process for that is to enter into that agreement with the county.
Questions, Commissioners? Either of you? Okay, how about a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve the contract between Weber County and Wakeless Holdings for those survey monuments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved. So, Steve, we were talking about this morning. Before we get to phase 2 of this, the lake portion, I would like to go with you and Charlie, and I would like to do a site visit to Syracuse, where they've already have one of these subdivisions, and I want to look at that before we get to that portion.
Okay.
So in the next month or 6 weeks, I think that'd be appropriate to go eyeball this. This is a substantial change from a normal subdivision.
Sure.
And, anyway, I would like to see it, and the other commissioners have agreed to that. So it'd be nice if you could set us up on a site tour in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks.
Okay. We will do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, item 3 is approval of an agreement by and between Weber County and Gage Crowther for the representation of indigent defense in the district court. Mr. Brian Barron.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So I received a phone call from Mike Bowis. He is our indigent defense coordinator last month, and he asked us to terminate one of our indigent defense attorneys. We'd been having some issues with that attorney showing up for court, not responding to emails. We'd sent him a warning letter in September, and he missed another court hearing on October 16th. So we sent the letter out terminating his contract, and Mike is requesting that we now hire Gage Crowther to take over those responsibilities. Gage was the runner-up last time we did an RFP, and he's been working in a kind of a limited capacity, handling our mental health court hearings for the past several months, and shows a lot of promise, so hopefully he'll be a good fit.
Does he show up for appointments?
He shows up for his court hearings.
That's good. All right, Commissioners, any questions to Mr. Barron?
I'll make the motion,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you're ready to receive.
I am.
I have a motion that we approve the contract by between Weber County and Gage Crowther for indigent defendants in the district court.
And I'd second that.
Very good. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. That's approved.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brian. Very good. Item 4, request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Triple J Concrete to remove and replace sidewalks that is not ADA compliant. Tucker.
Morning, Commissioners.
Wait. How are you, Tucker?
Good. How are you guys?
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Morning.
So this is a contract, just as you read, to remove and replace concrete sidewalk that is not ADA compliant. We haven't done it in a few years, so we're trying to jump on it and start fixing these places.
Where are these located at?
So right now we're kind of in the Uinta Highlands area, focusing over there. We've received some help from some concerned residents of some locations, so we're going to focus on those first, the ones that are the biggest problems.
Once again, this is kind of a municipal service. Something the city would do.
Exactly.
All right. Questions, Commissioners, either of you?
Do we have an idea what the cost?
So the max contract amount is $20,000. We have 6 or 7 locations, and we'll just go from there. And if it reaches 20,000, we'll stop. But if not, we'll keep going.
Got
on
it.
some other locations.
I'm okay with this. I'd make a motion to approve the contract between Weber County and Triple J Concrete to remove and replace sidewalk that is not ADA compliant.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's approved. Thanks. Tucker, appreciate that very much. Okay. Item H is a public hearing. So I need a motion to adjourn this meeting and move to a public hearing.
So move.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting and reconvene into a public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're now in a public meeting, or public hearing. The purpose of public hearing is to consider a resolution on a state-mandated modification to the Ogden Valley General Plan and the West Central Weber General Plan regarding the community's plans for moderate-income housing. Scott Perks. Well, Charlie.
I look a little different,
you
don't I? As Scott Perks. I don't know if you guys know Scott Perks or have been introduced to him yet, but he's our new planner in the planning office. Really sharp guy. Keep an eye on him. He's going to be a rising star. He and I worked on this project together. He did Western Weber area, and I did the Ogden Valley area, and then we collaborated to compare notes and data and bring this presentation to you here.
Great. So just before you get started, Mr. Crockett, is your monitor working? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the state of Utah passed a Senate Bill 34 last legislative session to try and address the affordable housing crisis that's going on here on the Wasatch Front and statewide. The issue that we're seeing is that real estate values are increasing at such a rapid rate, and household income values aren't increasing at the same rate. In fact, I think here in Weber County, I want to say it was out of Wall Street Journal, that there was an article recently published over the last couple of years that says Weber County is #1 in the nation for real estate value, the real estate value gap and the income gap in terms of the rate of increase of both of those. So something for us to think about as we move forward. Here for the unincorporated area, Weber County is only responsible for the Ogden Valley and Western Weber in trying to come up with good affordable housing strategies for those areas. Each municipality is responsible for their own. We had a housing plan that was conducted in 2000. I think it was put together in 2010. It was called the 2012-2014 Housing Plan. And we were required at the time to update biannually. And really, update just means go through the demographics and see how the trends have changed in that time. Here we are in 2019. The state code has changed and says we have to do that annually now so that we stay on top of it. The other thing state code says is that we need to plan for a 5-year planning horizon. So we're looking out to 2024 at this time. Next year we'll look out to 2025 and see if we need to make any kind of adjusts or tweaks to the plan, and frankly see whether or not we're being successful in implementing the plan. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Ogden Valley. Both Ogden Valley and Western Weber are rural areas, as you know. Not a lot of people, small denominator when we're doing the fractions. And so any change in that denominator makes the rates go haywire a little bit. So you might see a little bit more volatility in some of the data that we're presenting for both sides, as opposed to a comparison to Weber County as a whole. It's because the denominator in terms of population and households is pretty small. Okay. So the report in the Ogden Valley that is in your packet and attached to the resolution is a little outdated. I went through and did some edits, found some errors that I'd made myself, and so the one that you're going to see here is just a little bit more recent and with better information. I should probably say in advance of all this that both of these plans will need to be adopted by resolution. If you like what you see here, both Ogden Valley and Western Weber, feel free to make a positive motion on the resolution. And there are still a couple of tiny data tweaks and mapping tweaks that we need to make. So if you're comfortable with us making those after the fact and then get that resolution up for you to sign a little bit later today, that would be great. If you want to postpone to another meeting before making a final decision, that would be okay too.
So it's interesting, these household sizes keep shrinking.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's, one, because we're having fewer kids, and two, because we're aging.
Yeah, so the fertility rate is going down pretty significantly across the nation. Not quite as fast here in the state of Utah. In the Ogden Valley, it's going down faster than it is in Weber County. But as you can see that trend, if we're looking out to 2024, we're looking at even less per household than we have today. Number of households.
That's a demographic that's changing nation, or worldwide anyway. In industrialized nations, it's going down.
Yeah, there's actually negative trends in some of the Asian
industrialized nations.
Yep. So if you're looking at the population size, we do see a pretty steady increase. You can see a little bit of dip over the last year or two. I still think that's a denominator issue. Margin of error kind of throws it off a little bit. But if you look at the last from 2009 to 2017, we still see a positive increase. The rate of increase of the population trends is not as fast as Weber County. And I'll show you that graph in just a second. As far as households go, we still see those increasing. But what you'll see in the Ogden Valley is household is not the same thing as housing unit. And we've got a really big vacancy trend in the Ogden Valley. And that does affect affordable housing quite a bit, and I'll show you how. So here we have your Ogden Valley compared to Weber County in terms of rate of growth. Weber County growing at 1.31% per year. Ogden Valley is at 0.88, so a little bit more than half the growth rate of the entire county. Not growing quite as fast. As far as housing goes, show you that graph down there. So in looking at the bar graph there, you could see in Weber County, 25% of the households rent and 74% own. In the Ogden Valley, 7% rent and 92% own. And the 1% difference is other or homeless. or margin of error. Looking at the market value, the median market value for housing prices, state of Utah in 2017, 238,000. Weber County, 183,000. Ogden Valley, 367,000, double. So Ogden Valley median market value for residential homes is double that of the entire county, countywide. Looking at the pie chart, figure 5 here, you could see that we've got 51% vacancy. And that's up 5% from when we did our general plan in 2016. So in the last 3 years, well, from 2014 census data to 2017 census data, the vacancy rate increased 5%. That's a significant amount. And if that trend continues, you could see, I don't have a percentage on that, but we're looking at about 65% by 2024 if the vacancy trend continues. Housing units are being built, but only about half of them are being occupied. Okay.
The others are rentals?
Sorry. Well, so we do have rentals. We've got 4%, that green little piece of pie, are rentals, and then the 45% of all the housing units are owned.
I heard you say,
occupied.
if I can.
Yeah.
I heard you say housing units are being built, but they're not being occupied.
About half of them are being occupied. So we're talking about vacation rentals primarily. I think that's our primary affordable housing issue in the Ogden Valley. Aside from being a resort destination area, which by itself brings higher property values.
So Charlie, question for you. So those numbers reflect, when you say vacant, there, as we know, there's a lot of second homeowners
Right.
that occupy it less than 6 months.
Right.
Is that?
That is what this is.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there are a few vacant units, a small handful of vacant units that are either on the market, haven't sold yet, being held out for long-term rentals. The vast majority of them were seasonal recreation housing units.
So these are homes that are second homes, so they're receiving property tax, et cetera, on these homes.
Yes.
But they're not full-time, i.e. 6 months or more.
Yeah. The benefits and detriments to the same things. Because they're not primary homes, they're not being taxed at the primary home reduced rate. They're at the 100% tax rate, supposing we know for sure that it's a second home. And they're not demanding services of the community. So there's a benefit there. Detriment is that a lot of these homes that could otherwise be occupied by full-time renters aren't available because a lot of them are either just held out or they're being offered up for short-term rentals to the public.
And the other advantage is we don't have 3 or 4 or 5 kids going to our local schools that we're paying for.
Right, exactly.
The only thing we worry about, and we had quite a discussion down at the League of Cities, or the UAC about this, and that is many of these homes are receiving tax increment breaks that they shouldn't be receiving, and it's hard to identify when those are and when those are not.
Are you talking about primary versus secondary occupancies?
Right. And it's hard to understand when those are receiving that discount and when they're not receiving it. As well as some of them have business and if we're getting TRT taxes.
Right.
Often.
So yeah, TRT is a big issue. We miss the opportunity in the tourism tax. I chatted with the county assessor a few years ago when we first did this section of the general plan. And we were talking a little bit about all of the housing units that are not being taxed as second homes at 100% rate. And he said it's really hard to get to those. However, there are software programs, expensive software programs, that can help us figure out which ones are not being full-time, occupied full-time. The question there would be determining whether or not the cost for the software program would be compensated by the additional tax. So that may be a worthwhile thing at the time. Mr. Ulibarri said that I could advocate essentially for something like that. I think it could help potentially, as long as the cost benefit pays off there. So something to think about in the future if you're looking to capture that tax base. And also, if we know that they are second, we may know at that point whether or not they're being rented out through observation, enforcement, neighborhood reporting and stuff like that, and make sure they get on a TRT list. I also learned that the state is looking to implement TRT essentially at the company level, at the website level. So if you've got VRBO or Airbnb, there would be, similar to what Amazon does now, they take the state tax out, they would take the tourism tax out at the rental stage, which would be phenomenal if we can get that to happen, because then we would have 100% reporting on where the rentals are.
That'd be great.
Well,
We're
Go ahead.
That's something that we as a body would like to, where we're going to look at legislation to help define that, make that easier for us.
Yeah.
So, first of the year, that's the Airbnb is supposed to be under contract with the state, and that'll start happening.
Good.
Plus, we're gonna have a meeting amongst the group of us, and we'll make sure you and Rick are invited to that.
Please.
To sit down and talk about some other ways that the county has access within it, the ability to cross-check some of these things.
Great.
And we need to start looking at some of these. And so anyway, we'll make sure you're invited to that, Charlie.
Great. Thank you. And I've got a couple more thoughts on that as I close here as well. Let's talk a little bit about the housing units that are occupied. So a little less than half of the housing units are occupied. Of that, we've got 9% of those being rented, and the other 91% in owner occupancy. But if you look at Figure 10, when we're looking at the trends, 2017, we've got 56% of the rental units, the 209 rental units that are there, are affordable to moderate income households. However, that trend is going downward. So by 2024, that number will be 45%. And if that trend continues to go downward, then we're going to be looking at an affordable housing rental crisis in the Ogden Valley. It's a small percentage, looking at 9% of all of them that are being occupied, but still rentals is an important component of affordable housing.
Well, most of the rentals in the Upper Valley are seasonal rentals, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And
Yeah.
it's hard to pinpoint. We'll know when the 2020 census data comes out. We'll get the 100% count on how accurate the projections from the census are and the numbers we're looking at, and make the adjustments from there. I suspect the 209 that are being rented right now may not actually be, all of them may not actually be renter occupied. Looking down at this figure 11, what this shows, and we're still talking about rentals here, there's an annual growth rate in the monthly cost of rentals, positive 1.41%. But for whatever reason, the household income for renters in the Ogden Valley is going down. My suspicion is that we're getting people who would otherwise be renters pushed out of the valley because of cost and because of all the vacation rentals, that the higher income renters just aren't there anymore over time. Got one more graph for you to look at, or 1 and 2. So the top graph is median residential real estate, comparing Ogden Valley to Weber County and the state of Utah. And this is just looking at the trends, the rate of growth since 2014. I chose 2014 rather than earlier years because there, for whatever reason in the Ogden Valley, is a pretty big dip from 11, 12, and 13. And then it starts to go up pretty rapidly. And so I'm just comparing the last 5 years here so we can see that trend. If we look at the real long term, it'll stabilize at some point. We're just not sure exactly when it'll be. It usually comes in 10-year cycles. So you can see the Ogden Valley over the last 5 years is significantly higher than the state, and the county here. And then the next one down, it's the same kind of analysis as the renter monthly burden versus the renter income. This is the owner monthly burden versus the owner income. Median residential real estate value compared to area median income. And you could see, I'm missing a growth rate on that, but you could see that the real estate values are going up way faster than the income is, even in the Ogden Valley. When we look at median income, I just want to make sure we're all comparing notes the same. Median income is required by the state to be taken on the county level. So when you look in the Ogden Valley, the comparison that we have to draw on median income is what the entire county gets, which is pulled down significantly by inner city Ogden and surrounding areas. At $62,000 a year is the median household income, right around there. Ogden Valley, if you just took that in isolation, it's more like $87,000 per year. So they're about $20,000 a year more in median household income. And we've got the same issue in Western Weber. And so when the state says plan for moderate income housing, they're saying plan for what is 80% of your median income for the county. So you take 62,000, take 80% of that, you're looking at about 47,000 and some change. So we're trying to find housing or provide housing for families or households that earn 47,000 and some change. And if we do that, then we're moving towards moderate income housing. State law doesn't say how much impact we have to have, but they do tell us that if we don't have a plan and we're not implementing it, this is tied to transportation funds. So they can deny us transportation funding or deny us a priority when they're doing transportation funding. So get this adopted, and then we need to work on strategies on how to implement. As far as implementation go, the rental, the vacation rentals are affecting affordable rental opportunities. In fact, we've got people who I know are investing in properties because they know that the county's enforcement metrics are challenged in finding every single one of them because the state's kind of undercut our ability to find them. So state code said, it was changed a couple of years ago, but the change basically says that the county cannot use a rental, short-term rentals posting on a website as the sole reason to enforce a short-term rental ordinance against. And so the primary way that we can actually find out that these are being rented is to go to VRBO and go to Airbnb and actually figure out where they are. But the state has said that cannot be your evidence used when you're enforcing. And so we have to rely on the neighbors reporting these. We have to rely on us catching, self-reporting before we can actually take an enforcement action. If we want to take an enforcement action, there are areas in the Ogden Valley that can lawfully have short-term rentals, the commercial areas, the resort areas, and some planned residential unit developments. But there are a lot of areas in the Ogden Valley that it's not allowed by the residential zoning that exists. So finding those and getting them out of those areas is a really big challenge for us.
Charlie?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think that obviously is an issue. I hear on more than one occasion where people have purchased homes with the sole intention going into it, they're going to use those as vacation rentals or and then Airbnbs, what have you. And that's what I think we need to take a proactive approach, because these are starting to infiltrate because of these prices. Put that chart back up. I wanted to make another point here too. They're starting to infiltrate into neighborhoods that are not allowed by ordinance.
Right. And
that impacts the neighbors that, that bought those homes or built those homes for a number of years ago, or that didn't expect to have parties at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And so I think we need to be proactive in whatever that takes, and maybe we need to look at some legislation dealing with that this next year, because I remember the legislation that came through. That was a direct result of Washington County saying that that Washington County, by the way, Washington County takes a very active approach. They assume when a property is transferred down there, that's going to be a primary, or that's going to be taxed as a second home, full rate, unless you prove otherwise. I think we kind of take the opposite approach. So I can tell you Washington County is very aggressive there. Commissioner, I just point out, look at the difference in real estate value here. This was brought up at our Ogden Valley hearing a couple weeks ago, which was a good point that the people brought up, is they're paying the same tax rate on a 300 and looks like 67 versus 183. And are those services that are being provided equal to that revenue being raised?
Yeah.
That was the point that was brought up. So I think that's an issue we're going to have to address in the future. I think that's equitable representation.
Well, a wise man recently told me that lower density means higher taxes.
And whoever said that was spot on.
Brilliant.
So
anyway, thanks.
No, you bet. Three outcomes that we're looking at as nightly rentals. We're already trying to take a proactive approach in our office. Rick is working with Iris and others to get a website up and going showing where nightly rentals are allowed, so that hopefully we can get the real estate agents in the real estate world pulling up the website and helping advise their clients in that respect. And then finding other metrics is certainly something that we're going to be continue to look at. The other thing, the big challenge, besides being a recreation and resort community, the big challenge to affordable housing is the lot size requirement. And there's a double-edged sword right there. I mean, the Valley residents don't want density, so they don't want the lot sizes reduced because they think that automatically means there's going to be more density. But without lot sizes being reduced, we're not going to be able to market any of the homes. The market is not going to be able to market any of the homes as affordable housing, just on real estate, the cost of the dirt alone. So that's another issue. I think we should be pushing a little bit harder on cluster subdivisions, which won't increase density, but will reduce the footprint of housing, of lot sizes, which could make things a little more affordable, maybe not quite as appealing to a developer. But if we do use the current cluster code that we have, they can also sell the open space as privately owned open space, used as agricultural, so get a little bit more return that way, as opposed to selling one unit every 3 acres. We worked on the PRUD ordinance a couple of years back. We're hoping that the commission will revisit that here in the near future. By and large, the implementation strategies that were adopted in the 2016 general plan still stand. We're adding one in this document, which is to look for other enforcement measures for Airbnb or for nightly rentals. Excuse me. Any questions for me on that?
Questions, commissioners?
I'm just going to add to Commissioner Harvey's comment, which, by the way, was spot on. Lower density also means unaffordable housing.
Right.
That's true.
And less tax per real estate, per linear foot of street frontage, road frontage.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's true.
If you don't mind, I'll turn the time over to Scott, and then we can go to public hearing.
Yes.
Good morning, Commissioners. A lot of what we found in the western Weber area is consistent with what we found in the Ogden Valley, but there are some nuances that we'll discuss here real quick. So as we went through and updated the demographics and pulled new data for the area, a couple of things that we found in the western Weber area. And I apologize for my notes. The Western Weber area is growing slightly faster than the county as a whole. So we see a little bit more of the population growing in that area than in other areas as far as annualized growth rates.
So could that be because there's more open property to grow in out there?
It's possible. Yeah, there's more availability for development in that area.
All right.
Similar to the Ogden Valley, we also see a slight shrinking of the growth rate, the average household size in the area. The county-wide, we see it mostly flat, but in Western Weber, we see that shrinking just slightly over the next couple of years. And as we get a little bit further into the demographics, we'll also see that aging population being a component of that household size shrinking. When we look at the age distribution of the population, we saw that the older age groups, so those that are 60 years or older, are growing at a much faster growth rate than those in the younger age groups. And so this is growth rate. Those that are 60 years and older represent about 17% of the population. And as we kind of looked at this, we kind of saw a few things that may be indicative of more empty nesters perhaps in the area and fewer younger households that are able to afford housing in the area, which may be causing some of these age growth rates to show these differences. A couple of graphs to look at when we look at the owner-occupied housing growth by household size. And when we compare this to the next graph we'll look at, it'll kind of show a little bit of a story as well. So these are owner-occupied housing growth rates. So we see them growing slightly over the next 5 years. But when we compare to the rental occupied rates as they grow, we see that households that are occupying some of those rental units are growing at a much higher trajectory than those in the owner-occupied units. So we see that.
So there is some market-driven efforts being built to solve our affordable housing shortage. By this very chart, you show that. It's just not fast enough, right?
That's correct. So these are 5-year projections out to 2024. That doesn't necessarily mean that the housing stock will grow fast enough to capture the demand that we see here. But if the development keeps pace with the demand for rental housing, we'll see that the rental units will exceed those in owner-occupied units. Similar to the Ogden Valley, when we look at Western Weber for housing values, in 2017, Weber County, the median home value was $183,000, but in the West Central unincorporated area, it was 40% higher at about $302,000. In the Ogden Valley, I think it was about 50% higher. So we're pretty close on that disparity in housing values. One thing also to keep in mind, the AMI for the county as a whole was about $62,000 in 2017, but in the Western Weber unincorporated area, that median income was found to be about $85,000, which is fairly consistent with what we saw in Ogden Valley as well. So there's about a $20,000 difference in the countywide area median income versus the Western Weber area median income. Couple things that we saw that are a little bit different than what we saw in the Ogden Valley with regards to the renter-occupied income. We saw that the renter-occupied income was growing at just under 30%, which was interesting. We kind of scratched our heads for a minute to understand why would that be? Why would those renters have an income growth? And one of the things that we were thinking might be happening is those who are wanting to buy end up renting just due to the home values growing out of their ability to afford. And so we see more of those higher income households renting instead. And so we see that income for those renters growing.
Plus, I would imagine that from my personal experience, the backlog to get a builder and get a home built is so far removed that many of these times these folks are selling their houses like that, and they have to rent for a year or two while their new home's being built. You see that happen all the time now.
Exactly right. Yep, I'm in that boat. So it happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
Well, you may be quite aware of that. But one thing we also saw in the area we saw that rents were increasing, obviously, because the demand is increasing, but the rental growth rate is slightly lower than the income growth rate. So when we looked at the rent was increasing at about 25%. The income of those renters was increasing at about 30%. So they're keeping pace with it, but the underlying story here is those who are making perhaps lower than 80% AMI are going to find it more and more difficult to rent a rental unit as the rents continue to increase due to demand, and some of the higher income households are taking up some of those rentals, which makes it harder for those even lower income individuals to find competitive housing.
Wow.
And kind of as a snapshot of the trends that we found, you'll notice there's a couple of growth rates on this particular graph. The top one is the median value, home value, is growing in the west central Weber area at 23%. But when you look at it at the countywide, you're looking at 17%. And that's your property value growth. The trend on the bottom there in gray is the growth rate of the median income. So if income is only growing at about 6% and the values are growing at 23% out in the west central area and 17% countywide, we see that delta is continuing to grow for affordability as people aren't able to keep up their income with the values of housing. And that's kind of the overall picture we're seeing from a trends perspective. Specific to the west central area, we found in 2017 there were 1,123 moderate income households. But we see a current supply of those households, of units that are affordable to those households at only 201, which would indicate that we have a shortage of housing available for those households, 922 to be exact, and when we did those trends. So there's a current deficit, and as we see the growth trends continue out into 2024, that deficit will continue to grow if we don't put in measures to allow development to keep pace. By 2024, we anticipate there being about 1,600 moderate income households in the area. And that would indicate that if the west central area were to provide housing for the proportion of housing countywide for all the moderate income households, we would need to find and provide moderate income housing for about 490 households by 2024. Countywide, we saw there are about 1,700 new moderate income households at 2024 that would need to be housed. And if trends hold, we would see about 490 of those that would like to live in the western area. So that's kind of a synopsis of the findings we found through the trends and the projections. As far as goals and implementation strategies are concerned, we maintained the current goals that we had in the 2012 through 2014 housing study that the county is currently utilizing as a moderate income housing element of the general plan. So we kept those in place. However, we also implemented some of the goals that were identified and vetted in the Ogden Valley general plan, the moderate income component of the general plan. And one new element one new goal that we discussed with the Western Weber Planning Commission that they were in favor of, had a positive recommendation on, was to also look at allowing residential dwelling units in mixed use settings in the west central area. Recently there were about 40 acres of commercial zoning that was approved in the west central area, and as we look into the future, that could potentially become a village area where we could foresee some of this mixed use moderate income housing being compatible and perhaps allowing for the opportunity of moderate income housing to be developed. So that's a synopsis of what we found in the west central area. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Ford?
I'm good. Thanks.
It's great to get those numbers. Some of the numbers that we've seen, even in-house by Scott Park, as it relates to average income on home pricing between 2017 and just recently, as we've talked in our open houses, both up in the valley, and last night out in Plain City, those numbers are even updated again, and Scott Park has those for you. That'd be great to get those, but you're showing the same upward trends.
So when we see these trends, what is our action today? What are we approving?
So, as part of the requirements of Senate Bill 34, we're required to look at the trends, update our current estimate of supply and demand, and then project them out to 2024, which are contained within these amendments to the general plans.
Okay, so all we're approving today is your projections.
We're approving the plans and the goals and the efforts that we
Right.
would like to take in the next 5 years to try to tackle some of this affordability.
Very good. All right.
Commission, just to fill it in, these are elements of the general plan. So they are essentially, the one that you looked at from the Ogden Valley General Plan is Chapter 4. So it's,
Yeah, but we're not doing any zoning changes or any...
no, just updates to
Right.
those plans.
Right. Right. That's all we're doing. I just want to make sure of that, Charlie.
Yep.
That's the way I read it. Very good. Well, thank you very much. So, with that in mind, we'd like to open this to the public. It's a public hearing today. Anybody who'd like to step forward and deal with this, talk about it, we'd be glad to hear from you today. I don't see anybody out there. There's a few sitting, but nobody's interested in this subject. Well, okay. If that's the case,
You ready for a motion?
yeah, we'll close that portion of the public comment and go to a motion.
Yeah, well, I'd move to adjourn public hearing and reconvene as a public meeting.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. We're back in our regular public hearing now, and the item of action is H5, Resolution 58. Either of you care to make a motion on that?
Mr. Chair, I'll make
Yes.
a motion that we approve Resolution 58 in the Ogden Valley and the West Central Weber County Plan regarding moderate income housing.
Second.
Very good. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 It's a roll call.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a roll call. I knew that.
Sorry. My bad.
Commissioner Harvey,
Aye.
Commissioner Farrar,
Aye.
and Chair Jenkins.
Aye. Very good, that passed. Well, that's good. Commissioner comments is next on the agenda. Either of you wish to make a comment today about our meeting or anything else?
Nope, I think we've said it all today.
Well, we now have we're looking for a closed meeting motion. We have some things to deal with.
That was actually my comment. I'd like to make a motion that we move to a closed session to discuss strategy relating to pending or imminent litigation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's a roll call, Commissioners.
Roll call.
Commissioner
call.
Harvey,
Aye. Sorry,
Commissioner
Fatima.
Farrar,
Aye.
and Chair Jenkins.
Aye. So we're now in a closed meeting. We will be back shortly. Let you know what happened. Thank you.